Welcome to an introduction to visual literacy. Visual literacy is the ability to interpret, use, appreciate, and create images and video using both conventional and 21st century media in ways that advance thinking, decision-making, communication, and learning. Now this is both sides. This is both the teacher and the student in this case employing these skills. So why is visual literacy important? If people aren't taught the language of sound and images, shouldn't they be considered as illiterate, as if they left college without being able to read or write? Well, apparently George Lucas believes so. If you think about it this way, we're bombarded by media all the time. So anytime you pick up a magazine, anytime you're online and there's ads that are either popping up or running in a banner, Facebook as an example, and running ads down the side banner. So these are bombarding us all the time. So unless we're being able to interpret how those ads and how that media is intending to change our behaviors, then we're the equivalent of sheep and we're just following along blindly. So why visual literacy? Visualization tools enable students to make their thinking visible in all academic areas. So in this case, students are able to build interactive models to test theories in real time and use graphics to display their results. So this denotes the whole concept of differentiated assessment, not just changing instruction to be differentiated, but rather having assessment be that way as well. Graphic organizers and visual mapping tools enable students to make sense of complex subjects by exploring linkages, relationships, similarities, and differences between phenomena, and visually representing interplay among system components. So the idea is we can make more of a cohesive whole in explaining a unit than by just giving them fragments of thought without manipulatives. So I'm going to introduce several types of visual representations in a very generic fashion. So attention is the ability of visualization to attract, direct, and keep the attention of participants. So if we, pop something up there that's red and octagonal, and has white lettering on it, you probably are going to recognize that as being a stop sign. It's to grab your attention. It's iconic because it's a lexicon here, and in Canada it's the same style. It's the same principle. Gets your attention, changes your behavior. Recall is the ability of a visualization to convey content in a memorable way. So once upon a time, you learned that ROY-GBIV, for instance, is the acronym for the colors of the spectrum of the rainbow. So that's a mechanism of recall, that particular mnemonic device, right, that acronym, allows you to actually recall it better, which you can probably do. If I say ROY-GBIV, you know what each letter stands for. Overview is the ability of a visualization to synthesize detail and provide a macro structure that organizes many elements into a coherent whole. So again, an overview, probably a good example of an overview is, say, if we built the different the different aspects of government, of American government. So you have 3 branches, right? And underneath those branches you have several offices and responsibilities of who does what. If we did this in a visual manner, probably students are going to recall it better from memory because they have not just have read about it, but actually have been able to see what the model looks like. Comprehension is the ability of a visualization to foster understanding, learning, and making sense activities by showing relationships. So if we did something like, say, a Venn diagram, that allows us to show similarities and differences, right, and overlaps. So that allows us to work towards comprehension. Discovery is the potential of a visualization to trigger new insights for the user's participants by highlighting meaningful, interesting patterns. So for instance, if I click on that. Okay, so if I click on that, it kind of gives us an example of discovery. So until you actually see something happen, like the fact that the St. George Cross, the St. Andrew's Cross, and the St. Patrick's Cross are all combined to form the Union Jack, you probably see them as separate entities, as separate iconic or visuals. So by seeing them superimposed on each other, then you get the idea of the fact that the Union Jack is a composition, not just something that is created by itself. It's a conglomerate. Emotion is the ability of a visualization to trigger functional emotional responses to it. So the instance that I give is if you've ever watched something that has provoked very strong emotional response to it, it probably is going to get paired more with meaning and with understanding. So by provoking that emotion, that's probably going to be embedded into memory better. Coordination is the ability of visualization to guide a group of people and provide common points of reference, so something as simple as a map. The educational implications, well, the graphic user interface of the World Wide Web and the convergence of voice, video, and data into a common digital format have increased the use of visual imagery dramatically because it's always there. We can always hop online and look at stuff, right? And because of that particular premise, we have a certain phenomenon that's happening in schools. So what happens is if a kid is bored in your class with your content, the kid is going to do what I call on-demand learning at home. So go home, and if your lesson has been very static in terms of, let's say you're teaching about Mars, and you draw a red dot on the board, and then you start talking about Mars. The kid can get home, get online, and start looking at video streams from NASA, from the European Space Agencies, from the Hubble telescope. All of these things together make it a very media-rich environment. So unless, as a teacher, you're providing that within a context of the classroom, then you're going to have disengagement, but you're also going to feed into a very epic digital divide because those who don't have access at home won't have access at all. Students who are visually literate then have working knowledge of visuals produced or displayed through electronic media. They understand the basic elements of visual design, technique, and media. They're aware of emotional, psychological, physiological, and cognitive influences and perceptions of visuals, and they comprehend representational, explanatory, abstract, and symbolic images. This is kind of built into the whole idea of information literacy as well. So if a student sees something like this, and this is Vogue's first issue in India, they get a context for perhaps this is about selling products more than about equality or anything else, or racial blending. Because the target here is we've got the white girl dead center, surrounded by two Indian women that aren't in traditional Indian clothes, that obviously have straight hair, have a lot of makeup on, and what we look at there is the fact that what's Vogue try to do? They try to sell ads. It's commercial. They're trying to actually sell American, British, Canadian products to an Indian population. Same thing with this little ditty here. So the idea here is, if you want to pause this and read that, that's fine. But the idea here is the message is overwhelmingly, you need to stand up and be manly if you're going to wear Levi's. So throw that salad aside and the non-fat latte. For somebody who has a cholesterol problem, I should probably eat more salad and drink the non-fat latte. So the reality is here we're having a stereotypical perception. But again, this is targeting, teenagers, this is targeting people in their 20s and giving them a skewed sense of reality of what masculinity and femininity looks like, and roles. So, and again, we're back to like 1940 in terms of role play here, in the way that it's being described. Students who are visually literate apply knowledge of visuals in electronic media, so they're informed viewers, critics, and consumers. So we want them to be able to decode ads like that. Are knowledgeable designers, composers, producers of visual information, are effective visual communicators, are expressive, innovative visual thinkers, and successful problem solvers. So now I'll give you 7 different visualization types with an example. Okay, so we have the sketch, the diagram, images, maps, objects, interactive visuals, and stories. So the sketch is something simple. Anytime you draw something on your boards, your whiteboard or your interactive whiteboard at the school, or chalkboard if you're old school, then you're creating a sketch. It's to get your point of view across. It's trying to get something visual tied to the spoken word. A diagram basically describes flow, linkages, hierarchies. Image itself, this kind of shows you the impact emotionally, right? So if we talked about that emotional response to the visual, well, this is it. Now, I'll show you how the connotation, though, changes if you marry words to an image, because the feeling that it brings up is quite nauseous. But what if I say, well, that really hit the nail on the head? Well, then it has meaning, right? Then it becomes satirical because you know what my purpose was in actually putting it here. Map shows micro inside a macro whole. So this is the London Tube system or the subway system. So it shows separate components into a conglomerate whole. Interactive visuals, basically anytime you input data and you get some kind of change, that output is interactive. Objects, these are three-dimensional. So we actually have research on three-dimensional objects in museums. So what we do is we stage museums with very large three-dimensional objects, so the traffic flows towards those objects and directs the pattern of traffic, foot traffic, through the museum. Story is in the imagination. It's all of us can probably close our eyes and imagine if I'm saying, I'm swinging my foot backwards and then pushing it forward to kick a ball, and you know what that looks like in your mind's eye. Then we have several other forms of instructional images. That's going to be in part 2 of this lecture, so proceed on to part 2.